What?
No. No. Will you, after you're done pulling her hair out of her skull, take attendance for me?
That's fine.
Okay, first some taking care of business stuff as far as what's going on in here. One, no phones. Get off your phones. Because I have a feeling, in my opinion, why didn't they just get out of his way? Just let him shoot. Why foul him? God. Oh, it's clearly a foul. But why foul him? Just get out of his way. Let him shoot it. Anyway. All right. First of all, there are still those of you in here who have not finished your last Blue Book essay. That's crazy. You should finish that. Secondly, I am now talking to those of you who have not finished your third quarter paper. That's crazy. Finish it. I hope you understood the remind that I sent those of you who have not done your paper. If you do all 4 KIAs that everyone else didn't bother having to do by Friday, all 4 KIAs by Friday, I'm talking about 28, 29, 30, 31. You do all 4 of those, I will not penalize you for your paper. That's your penalty. Yes. Full credit. 100% full credit. Okay. Okay. Next little thing. I had a student up here ask, hey, can I fix my paper and resubmit it? And the answer is no. Sorry. That ship has sailed. I have graded those things. I'm sick of reading about it. So moving on. Okay. Next paper, do it better. There's 1 paper left. 1 paper left. Okay. Now to all of you, there are KIAs due this Friday, right? 32 and 33. I think it's World War II. I think. I'm not sure about that, but
Yeah, that's what I took notes on.
I hope that you're. No, we haven't taken notes on World War II. It's World War I.
World War I.
Yeah. I hope that the subject matter becomes more interesting to you. Thank you. We're starting to get into World War II and Cold War, and so I hope that you find that interessante. Someone remind me, when is your next exam?
10 through 12.
Yeah, April 10th through 12th.
That's 3 weeks.
Next week, 1 week from today, is April 2nd.
The Friday will be the 6th. And then the week
Right?
from
I mean,
No, it's April 1st.
this
it's not next week.
it's April. Okay,
It's not
we'll
next week,
agree
but
it's April.
following week.
So, I mean, I know it just seems like you just got done taking a test. There's another test soon. Okay? And you already know your essay topic. We're going to attack that after a few more notes on World War I. We will attack the documents for your 5th Blue Book essay. As a reminder, this is to everyone. Jack, why are you on the phone? This is to everyone. You are responsible for a synthesis article on the topic of dropping the bomb. Any argument that would fit in. And remember, that can go. We're now at the point in this class where your synthesis can be going the other way, right? You can go to a previous event in American history rather than generally the pattern that I've seen so far, and it's understandable, is most of your synthesis has always been later. But now you can start going the other way. And really, that's what I would kind of expect you to do because you've learned about it, right? The assumption is that you know about all this old stuff, right? Okay. Any questions on schedule, what you have to do in here? It's time to turn your brains on again. We've had a nice long week of having our brains off. Start that bad boy back up.
Wait, what's my brain? What is schedule?
Sorry?
Schedule? You always say that.
Schedule. Does it bug you?
What does it mean?
Schedule.
Oh, I was so confused. I don't know.
Schedule.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember this, but last time we had class, we just looked at a bunch of visuals of World War I. I'll just remind you, the way they fought it was trench warfare. This was a war where the technology was ahead of the strategy. This was the final war, really, where they marched in straight lines directly at the enemy, right? You think of the Revolutionary War, and here come the British, and here come the Americans, and they meet on a mutually agreed upon battlefield, and the lower ranked people charge first, and higher the rank, on they go. They still fought that way in World War I, but it was complicated by the fact that they had gas, they had flamethrowers, they had trenches. This was the first war where prosthetics were used. And so previous to this war, if you were injured, basically that was it. You're done. And now we can fix you and send you right back to the front lines. Yay! Terrific. Flamethrowers, et cetera, gas masks, machine guns. Okay. One of my favorite paintings. It's in the Louvre, which is in Paris. Okay, this is new. Don't write down all these statistics. That's beyond necessary. What I want you to try and figure out is, what am I trying to show you? So we're looking at an area that is in the Ottoman Empire. Which, do I have a map? Did I ever show you a map of World War I? Is there any map? Do I have a map? Map. There we go. Ottoman Empire. This chunk of land today is called Turkey. Okay. Within the Ottoman Empire is an area called Armenia. Who lives in Armenia? Armenians. Very good. Okay. I shouldn't say it. A lot of countries have their version of Native American, right? The Native American in American history is fulfilled by other groups. In Germany, it would be the Jews. In Turkey, it would be the Armenians, right? So let me show you these kind of interesting statistics once I get there. Yep, look at that. Wow, look at those. Holy cow. Marching. There we go. Armenians in Turkey. How many there were in 1914? This is at the beginning of World War I. How many were left by the end of World War I? Look at the numbers. Can anyone make a general conclusion? A lot of Armenians are killed. They were targeted by the Ottoman Empire. And we can spend time in this class asking, well, why? What was it about Armenians that warranted?
They weren't Ottoman Empire.
Well, they were. Remember, an empire is where one group of people rules over other groups of people. But I'll agree with you if what you meant was they were seen as a group of people in the way. Later on in this class, we'll study World War II, and that's how the Japanese viewed the Chinese. A group of people in the way of the glorious expansion of the Japanese Empire, the American westward expansion. The Native Americans were in the way. We will study German eastward expansion. Just like American westward expansion, the Germans believed they had the right to expand eastward. But there were people there already. Well, they were in the way. And the amazing number of people wiped out. When Obama was president, the U.S. Congress passed a resolution acknowledging that what the Ottoman Empire did was genocide. That this is genocide. You're targeting a group of people based on some common cultural characteristic. That's genocide. And Obama vetoed it. And I'm wondering if any of you can figure out, why did he do that? I mean, this is clearly awful. Very good. Turkey is an ally of the U.S. So again, when I say Turkey, it's Ottoman Empire, 2019. Had Obama signed that thing, Turkey would have been embarrassed and angry. Yep. And so sometimes that happens. Does Obama really think it wasn't a genocide? frankly, I doubt it. I believe he does think so. But in his mind, what good will have been accomplished by embarrassing an ally, Turkey? I would argue the same thing happened with Trump. Saudi Arabia is being accused of killing a journalist. Does anyone know what I'm talking about? And President Trump basically said, okay, now, does he think the Saudis probably had something to do with the killing of that journalist? I would guess so. But in his mind, what good are you accomplishing by embarrassing an ally? Why are you on your phone again? No. This might be an example of synthesis in your Blue Book essay, right? The wiping out of civilians. You could use this as an example, synthesis example in your essay. Okay. Any questions? Again, these slides will be available on the website. Okay. We're not going to fight World War I. We're not going to look at the battles. War's over. The U.S. and Britain and France won. Germany, Austria-Hungary, Ottoman Empire lose. Okay? So now's the time for the important part, the treaty that ends World War I, which, by the way, I'm fairly certain many of you know what it's called.
Treaty of Paris?
That's a really good guess.
Oh, I don't know.
It's called the Treaty of Versailles.
Paris, because it's always Paris.
But
It was in Paris. It's not called.
Versailles is a suburb of Paris. It's just outside of Paris. It's where Louis built his incredible castle, Versailles. It's got the largest maze, hedge, those bushes maze. I went there. I got lost. I ended up sitting on the ground, and this cute little French girl in an adorable little Easter hat came and grabbed my hand and said, "I did take you to this," and she let me out. It was adorable. It was so cute. Okay. So Woodrow Wilson, he's the president of the United States, does something that no previous president had ever done before, cross the Atlantic as president.
Wilson?
Of course, Wilson. Other presidents had done so either before they were president or after, but not during their presidency. He personally, remember now, Wilson thought of himself as a pretty special fella. Well, he had single-handedly stopped the Germans using submarine warfare by simply telling them to stop. Right? He'll be able to persuade the Europeans to see his point of view, which I'll remind you, he made a list of 14 goals, and I think you're responsible for like 6 of them or something like that. And they were all noble. He wanted this to be the last war ever. Okay? So we're going to miss there. But let's not criticize him for having that as a goal. What causes war should be what we address in the treaty. If X causes war, let's outlaw X, was his logic. And so I've got this picture here, which is cool. There's Wilson and the leaders of Britain. That's David Lloyd George. France, Clemenceau. Italy, his name was Orlando. And I don't know. I don't know who that guy is. It doesn't matter. Okay. I've got 3 columns here. And in the column under Wilson, the idealist is what he wanted. What was his goal? Under the imperialist would be, what were the goals of the victorious British and French? Because they were not idealists. They were here to punish the Germans, to make them suffer, to take their empires, to get paid. And then in the middle is what was the result. So Wilson said, hey, instead of fighting it out on a battlefield, why don't we just meet in a room? Why don't we have an organization where every country's there? And if there's a disagreement, you can argue about it. Every nation is logical. Surely we can reach a compromise. And the result was the creation of this thing called the League of Nations. It was created. Now, let me ask this. Who thought of the League of Nations? Who thought of it?
Wilson.
Woodrow Wilson. You would think that the U.S. would be a part of it. We were not. The U.S. never joined the League of Nations, even though it was Wilson's idea, which is weird, isn't it? I mean, he's the guy that's the driving force behind it, and the U.S. ended up never joining it.
So we're not now either.
Well, there is no League of Nations.
The United Nations.
Yeah.
The United Nations.
Oh, United Nations.
Okay. Second idea, and that is self-rule. Self-rule was the idea. If you're a group of people called Armenians, then maybe there should be a country called Armenia. If you're a group of people called Polish, then maybe you should live in a country called Poland, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So he wanted self-rule. The imperialists thought, no, absolutely not. The Japanese had imperial demands. They wanted to acquire the lands beyond their island. That would be an empire. The Italians wanted control of more land. They joined the victorious side, by the way, for this very reason. They wanted empire. The British had imperial demands. The French had imperial demands. And in their mind, it was simple. Germany lost. That means we get their empire. We get to take the German empire and divide it amongst us. And that goes directly against what Wilson said. No, they rule themselves. All right, well, what do? I say A and you say B. We can't have a compromise called AB, right? How do you compromise here? They either self-rule or they don't. And I will show you a map of the result, okay? But it is interesting to note the direct opposite goals here. Wilson, the idealist, saying, everybody shall rule themselves. Meanwhile, the victorious country saying, nah, we get to take what the losing countries had. Total opposite. The idea of blaming Germany for World War I. It's your fault that this happened. Wilson was totally against it. Why blame the Germans? What good will come of this? You're simply embarrassing them and making them resent you. They'll punish you later. An excellent story. How many of you have ever heard this story? That when the French got the Germans to surrender at the end of World War I, the Germans signed the surrender papers in a specific railroad car. When Hitler, 20 years later, when Hitler got the French to surrender, he found the same railroad car, had it transported to Paris, and had the French surrender to the Germans in the same railroad car. And you might think petty, but to Hitler, this was, right? Wilson was totally against it, right? The imperialists, again, when I say imperialists, I mean France, Britain, to a certain extent, Japan, Italy. They said, let's create a system called reparations. Anyone know?
Millions of dollars of debt into the people that are fighting.
Yeah, very good. So what the Germans were given was a bill for every dead soldier. Every dead French soldier had a price tag. You owe us for how many dead French, how many dead British, how many dead Italians. You pay for every dead soldier. That's what reparations are.
Wasn't it also for like
Yes. Yes. Okay. And then the creating of an elite. Why are you on your phone again?
I'm Googling when did Germany pay
Okay.
off
I know the answer to that. It was like during the Obama administration.
debt? Really?
Yeah, it was fairly recent. And then the stripping down of Germany's military. They were, by treaty, only allowed to have a certain number of soldiers. And I don't know what the number is, but it was ridiculously small. Like 100,000. You could not exceed 100,000. Okay. One other thing that's not on here that should be is that land was taken away from Germany and awarded to France. And that was the most productive land in Germany. and now France. It was called Alsace-Lorraine. It's a chunk of land right between Germany and France. It was taken away from Germany, awarded to France. That was the most productive land in the former area of Germany. You have now taken away Germany's ability to make money, which they need to do to pay for your dead soldiers. You've taken away their money supply and said, now pay us. Well, where are they going to get the money? By the way, where did they get the money? What? Yes, the U.S. lent them money. This is weird. The U.S. lent them money, which they then took and paid the British and the French. And the British and the French took that money and paid us because they were heavily indebted to us.
So we just got the money.
We got our money back. However,
We get more.
I mean, you think that's dumb, but you do the same thing. You borrow money to buy a car, and then you pay the bank back money. Right? The bank pays you money, and then you pay the bank back money. And you might think, if you're a fourth grader, you think, well, why doesn't the bank just keep the money? But there's this thing called interest, right? By lending out the money, the U.S. ends up making more money. At least that's the way it's supposed to work. It did not work out that way. Okay. Any questions here? That last little bullet there is sort of interesting. The Treaty of Versailles did become a reality, but the U.S. never signed it. We never signed it. The Congress refused to ratify the Treaty of Versailles, which means we never joined the League of Nations. We never agreed to any of this stuff. And the reason was because there was a specific part in it that the U.S. Congress did not like. It's called Article 10. Does anyone know what Article 10 said?
Yeah.
Someone in here knows what Article 10 said? Okay, so here's what Article 10 said. Let's go back to the League of Nations. Let's say that there's a country that claims that this chunk of land is theirs, and so like send soldiers in to militarily occupy that port, right? It's got access to water or something like that. Well, let's just say it's a dispute between Britain and France, right? So Britain claims that there's that'd be weird because there's a body of water between them. Let's go with Germany and France. There we go. Germany and France. There's a dispute over a chunk of land, and the Germans say, that's ours. And they militarily occupy it. And the French say, no, it is not. And so now, no more war now. No more war. So the French go to the League of Nations, and they say, we have a complaint to make. The Germans are occupying our land. And the League of Nations votes. And let's just say there are 200 nations. The vote is 199 to 1, the one being Germany. 199 nations vote, Germany, get out. And the Germans say, we vote against that. Well, they lost that vote, right? What if the Germans say, screw you? We're not leaving. That's right. 199 nations will then go to war against Germany. That would be the logic. Now, just think now, if we're part of the League of Nations, that means American soldiers are being sent to settle a dispute between France and Germany. The Congress was uncomfortable because in their minds, and you might agree with this, in their minds, there's only one group of people that have the authority to send American soldiers to war. Congress. Congress declares wars. You are now giving the power of declaring war to a foreign entity. And what they did was the Congress went to Wilson and said, look, can you just tweak the treaty and say with congressional approval? Then we'll vote for it. Woodrow Wilson is a special guy. He wrote that thing. I'm not changing a word. And then, so they said, okay, we're not voting for it. And then he had a stroke. And that was the end of Woodrow Wilson. We never signed it, which means technically the U.S. was still at war with Germany. The U.S. signed a separate quick little peace treaty. Honestly, it was like a few sentences long saying, we're not at war with you anymore. Germany, U.S. We signed it with Germany in a separate agreement in like 1922. The last country to be at war with Germany at the end of World War I was the U.S. Okay. I promised you a map. Last slide. This, try and feast your eyes here. This is a map of Europe before World War I. I want you to notice that there's this thing called Russia, which borders this thing called Germany. This thing called Russia borders this thing called Austria-Hungary, borders this thing called Romania. Okay, try and recognize what's going on here. We have this thing called Ottoman Empire, Austria-Hungarian Empire. Map after Treaty of Versailles. One of Wilson's goals was self-determination. If you are a person called Polish, you should live in a thing called Poland. If you are Hungarian, you should live in a country called Hungary.
It was called.
No, it was Austria-Hungary.
At least it's still on the map.
Yes, but they're no longer part of an empire, okay? Look at the creation of all these new nations. There's a thing called Poland. There's a thing called Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Belarus, Ukraine, Romania. There's a thing called Soviet Union. That's another story.
Turkey.
Turkey?
Turkey.
Turkey? You'll notice that Italy changes a little bit. They get more land. We awarded Italy land because they fought on the winning
Where
side.
does the land that France gets from Germany?
Yes, France. It's a slight change here, but you can see the kind of the protuberance. They were awarded a chunk of land, which, by the way, the Germans very quickly militarily occupied within a few years, saying that the French had no right to take it. And by the way, all the people that lived there, they're not French. They're German. They should be ruled by Germany. And if that sounds familiar, that's what Hitler said whenever he militarily occupied lands bordering Germany. He basically said, well, we're justified. Those people are German. Yeah, nationally, they're this thing called Czechoslovakian, but they're German. They speak German. They're ethnically German. We have the right to occupy them. We are justified in actions. And if this sounds familiar, it's the same thing Russia talked about when they invaded Crimea a few years ago. The people of Crimea, which is Ukraine, right? This chunk of land right here. The Russians invaded it, and they justified it by saying, well, those people are Russian. They want us there. It's the same thing Hitler said. Why are we justified in occupying parts of Czechoslovakia? They're German. They want us there. That's why we can invade Poland, and that's why we can invade Austria. Those people are German. These people that are suddenly in this thing called France, they're not French. They are German. We have the right to take them. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay. True story. I was in Czechoslovakia. I was in Prague. I get out of the train. I look. There are two flags that are crossed against each other with two portraits. The portraits are either about this big. Can you guess who one of the pictures is of? Me. Yeah, me. And then when I got out there, like, he's here. No, it was not me. Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson is considered one of the fathers of the country Czechoslovakia. He helped create it. The other one is, I don't know, some Czechoslovakian guy. Two flags. Guess what one of the flags is? American flag. Right? It's amazing. We were seen as heroic in Eastern Europe. We were the reason these countries came into being.
Didn't we just hate them like 10 years ago?
What? Didn't we just what?
Like everybody east of Germany was like hated in all the anti-immigration things 10 years ago.
I would say that today, this area right here is among the most pro-American on earth. They really
More than America.
They really do see America as a beacon of good. Okay, very good. Any questions?
Blah, blah, blah.
I'll give you a 2-minute break. In 2 minutes, you are with a piece of paper in your hand looking at the documents again, and let's maybe quickly review what we've covered so far, and then let's keep going with the documents that we are attacking. Yes, say 5. Yep.
About should we have dropped?
Did anyone need a new copy? I got them.
Yeah, I can use one.
No.
Me?
No, hardly at all.
This will be my one that I use.
Anyone else? New documents?
So we get nothing for this test too, so we can't write our essay on anything. That's enough.
Oh, yeah, I have.
Yep.
Promise to tell me the truth.
Yeah.
You don't even have Jordan.
No cheat sheet at all for this one, right?
Yeah. No cheat sheet.
Just think if you could have said there.
I wish. We just said, like, I just told Matt, I was like, we get nothing for this.
I heard Daniel too was there and he said,
Not even a note.
You don't need
Like a 2x2 inch, please.
What is that going to do for you?
Everything. All right, we want to say
I
I do not want to open it. I still don't remember if you like answer a question and you submit it and then you log off and you log back on and it won't like.
You have to click save test.
Yeah, but like if
But
you
don't go to the next question. You have to answer all of the ones that you're like if you're on like number 4. Answer all those. Don't go to number 5. Click.
Anyone
save
else
for
get
later.
savagely tan because you went somewhere nice?
Not really.
Where'd you go? South Padre? South Padre? Oh, same. I've heard that's nice.
I went to the Alamo. I was I know. What's the Alamo? I was there and I didn't know
Oh,
what it was.
it's where Texans attempting to declare independence from Mexico fought a battle against the Mexicans and they were wiped out.
I was like walking around. I was like, what is this place?
Was it cool or? I've
Yeah.
heard it's
It was pretty. The Alamo.
Wait, Maddie, what? So you answer the
It's
question.
kind of funny that you forgot what the Alamo was and the logo was Remember the Alamo. But you forgot.
That's the logo.
Well, I mean, it was
I
the.
didn't even know that. Where did
Okay.
I
I believe that we finished through document 4. Is there any desire on the part of Yuz to quickly rehash documents 1 through 4? Or did we think we got those? Is there anyone who would like to?
I would like to recap.
All right. So let's spend 2 minutes here. Who would like to be the champion of documents 1, 2, 3, and 4 so that we can help her and others who don't have the
Please
guts to
help me.
that they admit it. Go ahead. Be champion of document 1. Will you stand, please? Document 1. Tell us about document 1.
Document 1 is this guy named Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister of Great Britain. He argued that the deaths, that without dropping this bomb, there would be a lot more death. Like the bomb caused death, but the lack of the bomb would cause more.
Very good.
Document 2, U.S. President.
Well, will you pause there for a second? Let me ask you just a couple questions. What type of historical evidence might you consider? This is for anybody, not just Jack. What type of historical evidence might you consider looking for to prove this either right or wrong? Okay, so there was a plan. There was a plan that had estimates of how many they believed would die had there been a regular land invasion. Anything else you might think about? Very good. Find another battle where the Japanese absolutely refused to surrender and they were fighting over a big rock. Right? If they were fighting that hard for a rock, what would they do about the Japanese homeland itself? Okay. Any other ideas? What about arguing that this was wrong? Any strategic ideas here? Strategery? Yep. Sorry? What? Okay. Well, all right. Let me make a couple suggestions. The possibility that the estimates were slightly high because the advisors wanted to use the bomb. So, of course, they're going to inflate the numbers of estimated deaths so that Truman, FDR had died by then, would side with the decision to drop the bomb. That is there any evidence out there to suggest that they inflated the estimates?
Have the numbers been like re-examined at all, or like
That's a good question. I don't know.
I don't know.
Maybe look at other examples where invasion was looked at as so let's not invade. Let's just surround them and hang out. Why do you have to invade? Why do you have to invade Japan? I mean, by that time, Japan controlled Japan. Just surround them and say, all right, let us know when you're ready. Has the U.S. ever done that before or since? And the answer is yes. Right? That's how we did the Cold War. Did the U.S. ever invade Soviet Union during the Cold War? No. The U.S. simply surrounded the Soviet Union and its satellites and then said, all right, we're good. Which satellite? The only reason I'm going to disagree with you slightly there is I don't really think Vietnam was a Soviet satellite. Right? Okay. The Cuban Missile Crisis. The U.S. did not invade Cuba; simply surrounded it. And just, we're good. We'll wait it out. Okay. Very good. Jack, continue. Document 2.
Document 2. President Harry Truman. He claimed that it was justified because look at what they did. Look at what the Japanese did. They attacked us at Pearl Harbor, and they did it without saying anything to us beforehand. We weren't even at war with Japan before Pearl Harbor, and they just came out and flew planes into our boats. So we're plenty justified in dropping a big bomb on them.
Very good. And what is the obvious historical example?
Pearl Harbor.
Pearl Harbor, right? Tell me about Pearl Harbor, right? Any ideas about refuting this?
We killed more people. I don't know. It was civilians with the bomb, but with Pearl Harbor was military.
How many people died at Pearl Harbor? Anybody have any idea?
Like not.
I'm not really sure. I'm guessing it's going to be around 3,000. How many people died because of Hiroshima and Nagasaki? A lot, right? I mean, we're talking, I've heard estimates of 80,000 from one bomb and another 60 from the other, 140,000. And that's a light estimate versus 2,400 at Pearl Harbor, 140,000. Is that a balanced punishment? It seems excessive. Something like that?
What was the second one?
Nagasaki?
What was first, Nagasaki was second?
Yes.
One thing interesting is second bomb was more powerful by, I don't know, it was like a couple times. Yeah, something like that. It was like a lot more powerful, but it killed less people.
Yeah,
because the Nagasaki, like landscape, was more mountainous, hilly, so it continued to blast in that one small
Stupid
area.
mountains. That is interesting. I didn't know that.
I only know that because when I was a sophomore, we did this whole thing. We did a whole like big class debate on whether we were justified.
Which we will be doing. We will be doing.
Oh, I wonder who the judge.
And you're looking at the jury.
You better be on point because I know a lot of them.
Oh, okay. All right. Very
We were
good.
doing a class debate on whether they were there.
All right. Jack, you want to keep going? You're doing great. What about document 3?
Document 3, guys. Remember when I said because it's the Japanese? Well, this is a quote from a guy who is Japanese. We would have kept on fighting until all Japanese were killed, but we would not have been defeated. How that makes sense, I don't know, but this is a clear statement of what the Japanese military culture was like. It was never surrendered, and that's why, or at least
The land invasion.
this guy is taking this quote and making an argument against the barrier, right? The sea barrier, because the sea barrier wouldn't have blockade. Yeah, blockade. See, it wouldn't have worked because they would have kept fighting until everybody was dead. And the one thing about a blockade is that it doesn't kill anybody.
Okay, good. What's a historical evidence that you could? What evidence is out there that the Japanese tended to not surrender? Right, kamikaze. Again, look at some battles. We will be looking at battles of World War II, but you'll be amazed at the casualty rate of the Japanese. And it's like they're ants, and they're just. Have you ever seen any video of when ants confront a river and how they get across?
Don't they
They build a bridge out of dead ants. The first ants go and they drown, and then then more and more, and they just pile on. It's like that battle in Game of Thrones. They just keep piling on, and then eventually the last third of the ants cross. That was the Japanese. No surrender, right? Okay.
They're willing to die.
Document 4.
Document 4. Why wouldn't this is an argument against the traditional bombing? It didn't phase them. The technological superiority of a nuclear bomb pretty much showed them, hey, there is no chance of you ever winning this ever, and then that made them surrender.
Right. In essence, document 4 is arguing it's the only thing that would have worked. They would not have surrendered had we done typical carpet bombings. Can you prove that?
No. We carpet bombed the crap out of Tokyo, and they didn't get it.
They didn't surrender. Okay, I know this. I've shown this video before. I'll see if I show this before to you or not. But before Hiroshima was the first atomic bomb. Before Hiroshima, the United States had wiped out something like 67 Japanese cities. Wiped them out, including Tokyo. Hiroshima was city number 68. What logical person, after 67 Japanese cities have been wiped out, would say to the president, look, one more and they'll give up? That doesn't make sense. What made the Japanese surrender wasn't the fact that a city was detonated, destroyed. What made them surrender was the mushroom cloud. That one thing. And Japanese had to be convinced, you have no chance. Look. Okay, so she just asked a really good question. Did they surrender? After Hiroshima? No. Took another bomb, which is, thank God they surrendered after that one because the U.S. was out. The U.S. built 3 bombs, tested one, and used the other 2. Had the Japanese not surrendered, we would have been like, all right, can you just give us a year? Just hang on. Okay. That takes us through document 4. Yes? Let's get through at least 1 or 2 here. Who would like to attack document 5? Not Jack. I'm sick of his voice. I don't mean that. Document 5. Speaker, credibility. What's the argument? Can you prove it? That's what I'm asking. Who had document 5? All right, Hannah Montana, let's go. Stand. Yes.
She's crippled.
Oh. What does that have to do with you?
It was Dwight Eisenhower.
Who dat?
He's president at the time. And he
At the
was-
time of the quote, he was the president. Yes.
Yeah. He was against the atomic bomb because he thought that they were ready to surrender and that it was like basically pointless and that it was an awful thing. And he hated the country because he was like mad that they like went back to use it.
I still think you're missing the most important argument he's making. It's the last sentence.
To use such a weapon.
You actually missed the important part.
I hated to see our country. I just said that.
You still missed the important part.
Second,
We were the first people to use a nuclear weapon.
What does that mean?
We started the.
What did we just do?
We started the nuclear.
We established the precedent, right? In the future, now that the U.S. has opened that door, nuclear war is now a permissible thing. And countries could be, the U.S. could say, hey, you're using nukes. And you know what those countries could say to us? You did. We're following your lead. You set the precedent. That, I think, is the best argument that he's using.
What's the argument?
The argument is that the U.S., by using the atomic bomb, set a precedent,
What's a precedent?
a pattern to be followed. Right? Now, can you prove that?
Country to be the first. Yeah.
Let me ask this question. Is the U.S. today the only country with nuclear weapons? No. How come other countries want nuclear weapons? Because we have them. Fun little fact, no country with nukes has ever been successfully militarily invaded.
Really?
No country with nukes. It's a deterrent. McDonald's.
Yeah.
Although that's not true because when Russia invaded Ukraine, there was like a few McDonald's. So don't depend on those McDonald's anymore. They're not reliable. Hey, so he is saying two important things. One, here's an interesting claim. The Japanese were ready to surrender. That Eisenhower, who by the way was the top general in Europe, this is the guy that beat Hitler. And he said, what a dumb thing to use the atomic bombs on Japan. Number one, they were ready to surrender. Now, we would have to find evidence that that's true. But I will tell you, there is evidence that the Japanese were ready to surrender. It's just that the U.S. created this impossible threshold. And it's the word unconditional. You will surrender with no conditions. And the Japanese said, can we just have one condition? Can we keep our emperor? And the Americans said, nope, no conditions. Drop the bomb on Hiroshima. Now do you surrender? And the Japanese again said, can we just please keep our emperor? Nope, drop the second bomb. Now do you surrender? Can we keep our emperor? All right.
Because they don't want to.
We did. The U.S. allowed them to keep their emperor, which begs an obvious question. Why didn't you do that before? So there is an answer here. That's theory, but
Because we ran out of nuclear bombs.
well, that the U.S. wanted to use them. But what do you want again? All right, drop the bomb. I'm sorry. What did you want again? Oh, that's it. Oh, okay. That there was something else going on here, and I'll clue you in that it may have been the beginning of the Cold War. We were sending a message to the Soviets. See what we got? Look, check that out.
They wanted to like show off.
Pretty cool. You got 10,000 sunscreen? Because it ain't going to do you any good. But I do think that precedent one is a good one. Now, there is a refutation I'm going to suggest. How many nuclear missile bomb attacks have been used since Nagasaki? 0.
Then how come?
Nuclear weapons are the only weapon that I can think of that are meant to not be used. They are meant as a complete deterrent. That they've actually made the world safer, not more dangerous. Eisenhower here is suggesting a more dangerous world. Now that the U.S. has used nukes, we are now entering a more dangerous world. And you could refute that by saying, actually, it's a safer world.
Then, wait, how come you said they set up into using nuclear weapons and that they didn't want to be the first country to use the weapon?
Yeah, they set a dangerous precedent. They've not been used since.
They haven't been used since.
I know that. I just said that.
Oh, what are you saying? So they didn't start like other countries wanting.
Well, okay. Again, there's two things going on here. You could agree that a dangerous precedent was set and prove it by saying how many other nations now have nuclear missiles. But the refutation could
They
be
haven't been used.
they've never been used. Testing, yeah. Okay. I think you're shutting down, so I'm going to let you have the last 5 minutes to
We're not talking about
turn your brain off.
Hey, we got